To this?
Just I think describing the wheels of justice as grinding slowly will be a bit unfair. I think ultimately they have ground. You know, they make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I think with respect to what we can see about the criminal convictions, this is a message to all Kenyans that the lives of the people of this country shall be protected by the courts and the government of the day. If any person attempts to take another's life, I think that will be something that will be actionable in law. And that is what we have seen over the charge that has been met on the attempt of murder and over an attempted murder. I think we need to appreciate our justice system. And in my view, the reason as to why this matter has taken about 5 years is because the court had to listen to all the witnesses. It had to look at the plaintiff witnesses, the accused witnesses, and the defendant witnesses, all that. So the defense witnesses had to be looked at, and the prosecution witnesses. That took a lot of time. The investigating officer, the medical reports, all these are the things that have taken actually some time. For the court to make sure that by the time it is throwing a certain punishment over the offender, it will have considered his rights, it will have considered all the circumstances with a view to ensuring that justice is done. And I think, in my view, justice has been done. Any single Kenyan out there whose rights are breached by any other person, the courts of law are open, and they will be taken action against by the courts of our country. It's a good move on the part of our courts, and equally on the part of the accused person. The convict now who has been convicted, he can equally appreciate his rights by waging an appeal at the High Court with respect to appealing against the sentence that has been met by the Magistrate Court.
Okay, well noted. Munjiri, perhaps as you equally add your voice to that, I'm looking at the back page of the Daily Nation. Step down now, tutors tell NAT and KUPPET leaders, where the group says union officials ceased to represent teachers when they joined politics. A lot is happening within the teaching realm, even with that particular program, the TPD, set to roll out within the next few months. What's your reaction to this? Has the group let down the teachers, as this particular group is claiming?
First, I want to say that the simple reason why somebody would be licensed to hold a firearm is because maybe they want to protect themselves from certain potential threats, and they can only be justified to use that firearm when the threat that they are protecting themselves seems to be taking their life. And so nobody is supposed to use that as part of threat hawking or intimidating people around. If indeed that was the case, even policemen would be shooting at people anyhowly. And so people must always be responsible citizens and know that they have been given those weapons, or they have been allowed to hold those weapons and use them responsibly, and only when circumstances are that they are facing a threat on their life. The other point that I want to drive across is on the question that you asked. First, the teachers deserve better. And we thought that when some of these nominations would be taken to Parliament on the representation, and some of even those who are elected to go and represent the diverse interest of teachers, would be a reality. But for a long time, we have seen them sunken in power, and they have forgotten where they came from. This is bad for people who are taken to Parliament to represent strategic interests, or people who have been given the responsibility to lead unions but have forsaken that to pursue other selfish interests. The test of leadership is on whether you can be able to sacrifice your own interests for the sake of the common good. This is why I think the questions that are being asked right now are legitimate. And in democracies where we have people valuing the diversity in the political economy, okay, you have people within, for example, the Conservative Party, very strongly representing the interest of diverse groups. You have people in the Labour Party representing farmers, representing unions, and they have a track record of pursuing this interest as if their own self-interest. So the ultimate sacrifice is in people who have been given much to ensure that the much that is expected is fulfilled. These are not people who should always be given prominence as people who are going to make deals and forget about where they... But they should be public servants who work for the people who have given them and to which they act upon within that responsibility.
Okay, well noted. A lot happening within the teaching sector. Magufuli, perhaps your quick reaction to the Teachers Professional Development, that program that the tutors will actually part with 6,000 for refresher courses every year. Not Leadership just yesterday sort of trying to clear the air, told the teachers to ignore propaganda and wait for the right information on how this TPD will be enforced in these various teaching institutions. What's your quick reaction to this?
Yes, I will start with the Osewa issue because I know when you are given a gun, at least you should be responsible. You don't just use it anyhowly. And I want to say that this has served justice to the Osewa's family, and this has brought confidence to the judiciary system. Kenyans are now confident, and we have a trust in our judiciary. On the TSC issue, teachers issue, I want to say that sometimes when we elect the trade unions, when we elect our leaders, they reach there and they forget the interest of the teachers. So I urge the teachers to be very keen in the next election. I know they are electing very soon, so that they don't make the same mistake. On the TBT issue, I will, when I give my voice, I want to speak the same voice with the NAT, to wait for more direction.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, let's wait and see how it all falls out. But Bashir, interestingly, and away from those talking points, the International Court of Justice, I think it's the 12th of this month, is set to give a ruling on that prolonged Kenya-Somalia maritime dispute. And I know the proceedings were held orally, and Kenya sort of stepped out due to what it called bias. What are the likely scenarios in this judgment? Is it legally binding? Does Kenya have to heed to what the International Court of Justice declares?
Jesse, you see, the international waters of our country is so central to our democracy. It is so central to us as Kenyans. You know, we really own them. We are so interested in protecting them at all times, and we shall protect them by all means. That is a belief that we all hold with respect to the government and the members of the public. With respect to what has actually taken part, what has actually taken place in the International Court of Justice, Kenya decided not to proceed or to undertake in that hearing. What is the effect of that? That's actually what I want to contribute about. Whenever you have any case that is ongoing in a court of law, if one of the parties decide not to partake in the proceedings of that case, it shall have a very, very bad effect on that body. That tells you, you decided to abrogate yourself of the right to participate in that specific proceedings. That tells you that Kenya did not get an opportunity to be heard in the proceedings before that specific court, because Kenya actually had shared its frustrations with respect to the biasness and all that. What is the outcome, or what is the expected outcome of that specific decision of the court? The expected decision, it's quite predictable in the sense that if you do not partake in proceedings before a certain court of law, the court will only consider the submissions of the other party. The court will not have an opportunity to listen to you because you decided not to partake in that. The court was supposed to have not proceeded with that because Kenya actually had lamented it had brought forth issues to do with biasness and all that. Now, in the event a certain decision is met that will not be in the interest of our country, what will happen? There are certain countries that have historically decided not to abide by the decisions of that specific court, and I think that is the plan of our country. By all means, I think our coastal waters are so important to us. By and large, that is what is important to us. Equally, Jesse, another issue that I wish to underscore is, I was born and brought up in the northern part of this country. I had an opportunity to visit the Kenya-Somalia border. Is the case before the International Court, is it important to both countries? Kenya has been the big brother to Somalia. Kenya actually has really played a pivotal role with respect to imposing or putting in place running mechanisms, or, a good order, a good government to ensure that the security of the people of Somalia is paramount. Kenya has actually lost a lot with respect to ensuring that Somalia is able to attain stability. This kind of a case is not so good because Somalia will not be appreciating the elder brotherness that Kenya actually has really played with respect to that country. But I think, Jesse, it's a wait and see, and I'm sure that our Attorney General has a certain plan in mind with respect to how the outcome shall go.
Well, we'll definitely see how the scenarios play out. Interesting developments set to break down on the 12th of this particular month when the International Court of Justice will give the ruling. Ngunjiri, as we finalize on the press review, I'm looking at a report on page 8 of the Standard. Kenya is set to hit the 9 trillion shilling debt ceiling in a few months. And on one side, we have the Auditor General quoted saying the National Treasury is to blame for the unrealistic budgeting for the runaway expenditure. The Treasury CS on the other side saying the government will soon have to expand the borrowing limit. So it's a game of when, not if, we will expand in terms of this debt ceiling. What's your reaction to this, especially since the economy is on the political tongues of so many of these political leaders? Many of them are fronting economic changes, but as it seems, we are getting deeper and deeper into this debt hole. What's your reaction to this?
First, let me respond to the question that you just asked, Bashir, on the political implications of the ongoing case between Kenya and Somalia. You see, there are certain commercial strategic interests of countries who have certain interest at the maritime area because of the rich minerals that exist within that area. And so the speed at which the case was taken to the International Court of Justice and the speed at which those judges are now wanting to make a determination also brings a question and who has a role within the UN Security Council, which is the main organ that can be able to pull strings here and there on, for example, an organ that is within the United Nations. Kenya has an existing signatory with the international law on the sea. And so I wonder why, since 1979, at this time and at the background of the London Oil and Gas Conference, which was part of what brought all this conflict, why certain people at this moment have decided to take as part of their agenda to push for the determination of this case very fast. And so, if we have a third party interfering with matters that are supposed to be enforced by a neutral arbiter, then Kenya has a legitimate reason to stay away from the case. And that is why I think a few months ago, the Kenyan government decided to withdraw from the cases that were happening there. And so I believe that as a way forward, because the International Court of Justice has the jurisdiction to determine on this case, but which now also reverts back to us as a country, will we allow our territorial integrity to be interfered with? Because the maritime area, and the argument that we are giving, the turn must take 45 degrees to give us an extensive land of, I think, 160 square kilometers, 1,000 square kilometers. We must safeguard the interests of Kenya, and because the court has no enforcement agencies on how this goes. Me, I think that as a country that fought for independence and which believes that our fishermen must continue getting their daily bread. We are not under duress by any colonial power. We must stand our ground, and at this time, as a nationalist, I say that Kenya must not agree to give an inch of that maritime area. I also want to answer your question by saying that we are, I think right now, 65% debt ratio to GDP. If you look at certain World Bank reports, they have said that a country that is going up to 65% ratio to GDP is at a risk of plunging into a financial crisis. And so this is why some of the decisions that have been made in the past on the economic policy of Kenya were totally brutal to our circumstances as a growing economy. These decisions were not made out of a foreseen circumstance where we shall need a local economy that builds our taxes and improves our local production to be able to build us. So, going forward, and I heard the Treasury CS saying that they will implicate radical economic policy shifts. I wonder what radical economic policy shifts will come when, as a country, we have not factored the most important factors that create wealth and which will expand the taxes that the government collects, and only refer to a policy that in history has been argued to be one of the most unreliable policy, that is borrowing, and which has often plunged countries into a crisis. I think that as a people, we must come out of this shell that the Marshall Plan, which was for the reconstruction of Europe after 1945, and which was only a very small magnitude, I think about 1%, continues all over these years to hold countries hostage and make countries to always over-rely on foreign aid for them to develop. I think that, and this is well anchored in the bottom-up economic model, we need to create an economy that produces wealth. We have the factors of production. We have the required manpower. We have the raw materials that we need, that is land and everything. We only need to use all those factors to make sure that we have anchored our policies in agriculture, which will now bolster manufacturing, agro-processing, get into value addition, make sure that we improve our policy on foreign trade and local trade, and also make sure that we have sealed where money is going through corruption and through patronage, and make sure that this country is self-dependent. We must reduce this debt ratio to 20% in the next 5 years. And these are some of the dreams that we can be able to achieve. If indeed we said, in as much as we need brick and mortar, we must be able to create a nationhood that has people who are able to create their own personal wealth, and in turn, they will not so much depend on government. They will open businesses, they will continue paying taxes, and in such a case, the government can be able to finance itself.
All right. Well noted. Definitely belaboring on that point, but at times, other economic analysts mention that the bottom-up economy and rural-urban integration are sort of the same thing. It's just different scripts they're reading from. But it's good. This is a conversation we're having in terms of the state of the economy in the country. So Magufuli, as we wrap these things up, your reaction?
On the debt issue, Jeff, I want to say that as a country, we should have a law that prevents anyhow borrowing, because you will get that most of this money that is borrowed is just lost through corruption. They don't borrow money to develop our infrastructure. So we should, our members of parliament should pass a law to prevent borrowing that is not meaningful to the nation.
That's well noted. Thanks for that contribution. Member Magufuli right there, the Secretary General of the National Reconstruction Alliance. I'll give you 1 minute each. Suleiman and Ngunjiri, perhaps your final comments on the latest developments in the country as we finalize this press review session. Ngunjiri, with you first.
Well, first of all, I think that the reality of Kenyan politics is coming home, and people are now realizing that the conversation that we started as Hustler Nation of engaging Kenyans is a conversation that the people have now owned, and the competition now is based on how best the potential presidential candidates who will be able to transform the lives of Kenyans through the economy. Indeed, we have set that conversation, and I want to ask each and every youth today for us to guarantee that safe future where we have a government that cares about the progressive public policy on youth. Let us go and register ourselves as voters, because we must make decision and make this decision wisely. We must participate in the process of the most critical part of manufacturing leaders, and that is election. I say that for all political parties that are involved in this, it is your mandate now to make sure that you engage your members, and also for the aspirants that are vying for various positions to continue conducting civic education and encouraging more and more people to go and register as voters so that we can have a richness in our politics and democracy. Let me end by saying, Jesse, that it is either we progress together as wise people or perish together as fools. That is Martin Luther King. I hope we will progress together as wise people in one nationalistic and one solid country, Kenya.
Okay. Well noted. Suleiman Bashir, briefly before we take that short break.
Jesse, on the question of the public debt, I think it has been a big problem in our country. Our parliament actually should not allow that the debt ceiling to be expanded more and more from the 9 billion mark. I think there is no need to do that. You see, sorry, Jesse, I think in my view, what will happen is with the debt problems that we are in so far, because our country is said to have so far borrowed about 7 trillion debt, we are in that. And the other day we had seen that part of the reason as to why the fuel prices have actually have changed or have gone up, according to the Treasury, the monies that were supposed to have subsidized the fuel prices were used to offset the cost, the debts with respect to the standard gauge railway. So that shows you that the impact the debt that we are in is having on the ordinary Kenyans. This tells us one thing, that going forward, two things will happen. One, our parliament should find an alternative to just expanding the debt ceiling from the 9 trillion mark to maybe another mark 1, 2. The second thing, actually, Jesse, that we need to appreciate is going forward, the leading presidential contenders, those who are interested in becoming the president of the day, they should tell us, as a people, what alternative shall they do that would alleviate us of the debt borrowing that we are in. How will they address the debt question without affecting the ordinary lives of the Mwananchi? Okay. These are the questions actually that shall shape our discourse going forward. And we really hope in future that those who are interested in sitting on that very important seat shall be in a position to share with us their vision with respect to how they're going to address this, Jesse.
Well noted, and due to time, allow us to finalize on that particular note. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your contribution in terms of taking a look at the latest developments and what Kenyans can expect in today's edition of Kenya's bold newspaper, The Standard and The Daily Nation. Suleiman Bashir, advocate, joining us in studio, as well as Kariuki Ngunjiri, political analyst, and Amemba Magufuli, the Secretary General of NRA Party. Let's take a short break on that particular note. Plenty more on the other side. Good morning. Stay with us. You're watching Morning Express.
This is KTN News.
Most countries, especially in Africa, are ill-equipped to handle what the United Nations says is a looming global water crisis caused by climate change and population growth. We take you inside Somalia's first public oxygen plant, a shot of hope for a country where life-saving treatment for the coronavirus has been largely unavailable to patients during the pandemic. Two Burkinabe community leaders are named co-winners of the 2021 UNHCR Nansen Refugee Award for Africa for the support, shelter, and food that they organize for thousands of people fleeing conflict. And if anyone doesn't need reminding, the banknotes are just worthless